Hello. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday and another one recently in the last couple of weeks, trying to not so much get them just to play with me, but to explain to them why I'm into something that I'm into. And I got thinking about it to the point where I said, you know what, maybe I'll make a little presentation for other folks as to why I'm into this thing I'm in and why they might want to give it a try. So I'm this might be short, might be long, depends how into it I get. But I decided that I'm going to do a little different from what I've done with these normal in-person ones, but also going back to a topic that if you've seen my channel, you know I hit on quite regularly, is my longtime love and why I think people should give a shot with the Battletech MechWarrior universe and game series. Um, I'll start off with, we'll call it point zero. If you're somebody who's into any kind of sci-fi slash future slash role-playing game slash tabletop war game, any of those type backgrounds, whether it be miniatures, tabletop role-playing game, or computer games, well, video games in general, not just on computer, there is something in this universe for just about anybody from any background to sink their teeth into and appreciate. So I wrote down, you'll see me looking up at the screen here to make sure I stay on topic and try to break it down into bullet points and not ramble quite so bad as I tend to do. I'm aware of that. I wrote down into 6 points that I think are things that if I was to try to convince somebody, sit down like I've done with friends in recent years and try to, why I'm so into this and why they might want to give it a try. So we'll start off right off with point one, which is whether you're somebody who and I'm going to say this going to somebody who might not be at all familiar with knowing Battletech and MechWarrior. If you're somebody who comes from a background of something like Star Trek, Star Wars, obviously, Dune, any of those that are these future set in a sweeping space opera kind of setting, to a lesser extent, Warhammer 40K. This is a universe that would be right up your alley, right in your wheelhouse. Excuse me. BattleTech is set 1,000 years in the future from now, where it picks up is 1,000 years in the future. It then extends more than a century from where the game point started. There is, which I'll get into in a later point, there is sweeping, intricate political intrigue. There's sweeping warfare, all these other things. But at heart, it really boils down to, as something that started in the early to mid 1980s tended to do, something very much influenced by Star Wars, Star Trek, and Dune, is this: what is humanity like in this far sweeping future that we have? In this, as I've mentioned in another video, there's no aliens. There are non sentient aliens. Planets that humanity has settled on does have, plant and animal life, things like that, and things you have to deal with when you settle on a planet. But at its heart, it's a story of humanity, the good, the bad, everything we take with us everywhere we go. Humanity is a violent and, whether or not we like to admit it, bigoted species. Even if, you're somebody who's open-minded, tries not to be racist, sexist, bigoted like that, we all do have our little things that we tend to prefer. Even if we try to not do them outwardly, we all have them. And Battletech, I won't say glorifies that, but it definitely embraces it. But it does it in a way that is not clubbing you over the head with it. That there is nationalism, there is still religion, there is to a certain extent racism, even though humanity is much more spread and intermingled than it is in our world. But you do still have some of that. So there are recognizable plot elements and themes to pretty much everything else you'd ever see in a space opera future type setting. Humanity, fuck yeah, basically. To get into the second point and go off that, with that, however, It is not the future of our current nations. It is multinational and multicultural. If you are just, for example, I'll kind of, go around the wheel of the inner sphere. If you're somebody who is into history or into culture, and all of these, those viewpoints will apply. If you kind of wonder what would happen if a space society of people, humans again, obviously, was the mercantilistic and money centric, uh, say of like the medieval Germanic Hanseatic League or like the East India Company, the things of like the up to the 18th, 19th century, and combined that with the Imperial German military bureaucracy of the late 19th, early 20th century, the Lyran Commonwealth and House Steiner are right up your wheelhouse. They're for you. If you're somebody from a more Eastern bent, uh, specifically, we'll say Japanese, and in this case, I will point out the pop culture, and they kind of make no bones about it, pop culture weeaboo version of Japanese culture. Because remember, this is 1,000 years in the future, looking back on it through a much later lens, with Bushido and samurai and all that stuff, combined with elements of other cultures, House Kurita and the Draconis Combine. There you go. Very, very much imperial Japanese, shogunate period style with, the samurai, the Bushido, seppuku, all that stuff. If you're somebody who likes, and again, they don't make bones about the fact that they're not as good as they pretend to be. But if you like the idea of like the Germanic French ideal, or I'm sorry, British French ideal of, the knights in shining armor, we're the good guys, hurrah, we fight for freedom and liberty and all that. But in the background, it's very much darker and different from that. House Davion and the Federated Sons. There you go. I mean, they got the shining sword in front of a sunburst for their shield, and their home, or I won't say home planet, but their capital is the world of New Avalon. So that tells you all you need to know right there about how they see themselves. Like more the kind of a darker take, and where it would go with, say, something like communist China, North Korea, things like that, with, of course, elements of other things, because they're all very multicultural, even if, the ruling house and dynasty tends to come from a particular aspect. The House Liao and the Capellan Confederation, backstabby, insular, kind of the butt of everyone else's aggressions and jokes and everything else, but still a force to be reckoned with all the way through the games, even if some of their leaders are a little out there. Uh, they're for you. You're somebody who likes, say, the idea of what would happen if all of this multiculturalism was put together into one state, but it didn't exactly mesh real well to where they were a more or less unified state, but they were very, let's say, balkanized within that unification. You like the idea of something that has multiple languages, multiple cultures, all of which are more or less on an equal footing. You could be a little bit of everything from somebody who speaks English to one of the Slavic languages to Romanian to Italian to Hungarian and all these things. House Merrick and the Free Worlds League. It went through some rough times over the years. If you go up to the where the storyline currently is in BattleTech, it's kind of getting itself back together. But you like that idea of infighting and at each other's throats until there's an external threat, and then you all pull together just to kick the living shit out of whoever might be attacking you. Free Worlds League, there you go. And a little bit later, you like the idea of a breakaway state or something that is, might have come from another culture, but it is its own thing and it's very fiercely proud and independent. Free Rasselhag Republic, which broke off from the Draconis Combine, is between it and the Laren Commonwealth. Very much Scandinavian influence, almost like a Viking, but not with the expansion and raiding, but more in the martial pride and fierce independence of the Scandinavians. And you also have breakaways from the Capellan Confederation later on, like the St. Ives Compact and things like that. You like the idea of the Capellan kind of lifestyle or ethos on things, but a little bit more liberal, a little bit more outward looking, not quite the backstabby, insular police state that the Capellan Confederation is. There's the St. Ives Compact. You also have, of course, the periphery, which one planet to the next could be a completely different lifestyle, completely different outlook, a little bit of everything out there for that. And we won't even get into the clans. That is a whole other topic. I'm staying off there. We're mainly just talking Inner Sphere for this one. But the clans are also a very interesting thing. Give you a lot of options if you're interested and want to play. I'm just not going to get into it because that is a whole other can of worms we're getting into with that. I like some of the clans. I like the idea of the clans. Not going to get into it in what's supposed to be a relatively short video here. I could probably do a 2-hour talk just on that. All of that is point 3. If you are somebody like me, who I got into the two at about the same time, but you also come from something like Mobile Suit Gundam or Evangelion or to a lesser extent something like Eureka 7, things like that. You come from the giant stompy robot anime background. It does not have the anime look and feel of it in that, you're not super soldiers fighting aliens out in space, or in the case of Mobile Suit Gundam, colonies around the Earth. This is much like Mobile Suit Gundam. This is humanity fighting humanity, but in the future with giant robot mecha. However, again, like Gundam, it is real robot mecha. It's not super magic technology. It is more or less grounded in real science. You can wrap your head around how the weapons work. You can wrap your head around how the fusion reactors that power them work. In universe, they explain the technology of everything. So if you're somebody who comes from like a Star Trek background, where even if it's just a technobabble explanation, you like to understand how things really work and why things are the way they are, Battletech is very much that. When it started in the 1980s, it actually took some of the mecha designs that they started out with. I believe it was 1984. The initial release of it was called Battle Droids. They had stuff literally right out of Robotech, Macross, Dougram, things like that. Over the years, they have greatly expanded the mecha that they use. In recent years, they've gone through a large redesign. So a lot of these old designs that were the intellectual properties that they no longer had the legal right to use because they were owned by Harmony Gold, they could then, they redesigned them enough to be inspired by but distinct from those things. So they have made a comeback. What used to be called the Unseen, all this stuff from Macross and Robotech and Dougram is now back. Things like the Warhammer, the Marauder, the Archer, all of those, they're back. And some of the more designs that they came out with in the 80s and 90s, where you could tell what they were going for, but the execution really wasn't there. In recent years, some of their artists have really stepped up and redesigned these things. And they have come out with what used to be the pewter miniatures that everything used in the 80s and 90s. They've kind of gotten on board with the idea of companies like Games Workshop that do things with molded plastic. It's much cheaper. It's easier to work on. If you break something off, you can just crazy glue it back on, whereas the pewter tends to bend and break and distort, and you're kind of screwed unless you're good with working with it. And it's also much, much, much cheaper to buy a force of plastic minis than it is metal ones. Easy to paint, easy to work on, infinite ideas for how to paint them and customize them, all that. But it is just grounded in that real robot mecha. They are basically, I hate the term, but it is the best way to describe it. They're not super robots, they're walking tanks. They're real world grounded war machines, just 1,000 years in the future with advanced technology. They're recognizable. The tactics are recognizable. How and why they're used the way they are is recognizable and understandable. If you are somebody who comes from a modern wargaming, like you're somebody who does like bolt action, things like that, you're going to recognize the tactics. You're going to understand it. You might have to wrap yourself around the rules, which I'll get into in a later, but it is from any of these backgrounds you're coming from, whether it be anime, cinematic, tabletop gaming, as far as the miniature gaming goes, it is going to be recognizable to you. It's not going to have to completely redesign the wheel mentally, basically, for you. You're going to be able to jump in and understand it. Uh, Another one is if you are somebody, again, like me, I'm old enough. I grew up watching things like, Alien, Blade Runner, things like that. It is that kind of aesthetic. Battletech is, even though the more recent art kind of gets away from that because our technology and our world has advanced so much, they've kind of progressed the art to make it recognizable to us. But at its heart, Battletech is the future of the 1980s. It has that, what they would refer to as retrofuturism or cassette futurism, I've heard it referred to as, which is very much like you'd see on a ship like the Nostromo in Alien, or like you saw in Blade Runner, where there's this veneer of future technology and advancement, but there's still a pall of cigarette smoke on the ship of the or the bridge of the ship. There is still this, toggles and push buttons and switches. It's not touch screens. It's not voice commands on everything. Um, it is very much that if you like the 1980s take on the future, even to a certain extent 2001 A Space Odyssey. If you like that take on the future, as opposed to, say, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, it's 60s Star Trek versus modern Star Trek. It is that blinking buttons everywhere, toggle consoles, analog inputs. It is not touchscreens, iPads on everything. If you like that style, it is right in your wheelhouse, right up your alley for that. If you're somebody who, another point, with it being so popular, kind of faded since, but things like Game of Thrones, with the backstabbing, intricate plots, political maneuvering, and all that, Battletech was doing Game of Thrones long before Game of Thrones was a thing. There is the warring and backstabbing and political intrigue and backroom dealing and all of that is a huge, huge part of the universe and the setting. So if you like that kind of thing, check out some of the Battletech novels or the tabletop role playing game for Battletech. If that is more in your wheelhouse than, tabletop miniature wargaming with big stompy robots and all that, give it a look for that, even if you just get into it for the story and the plot. Again, it's right in your wheelhouse for that if you come from that kind of background. And the last one I'll say is, this is a contrast, not so much of a criticism, because I have friends that are very much into Warhammer 40K. Battletech is and continues to be something that has a very different approach to the game than Games Workshop does. What Games Workshop does works for them. I am not a fan of the setting. I'm not a fan of how they do things, but I have friends who are rabid fans of Warhammer 40K. It appeals to them. They like it. It's just not for me. However, Battletech is, to contrast, Warhammer 40K will be constantly coming out with new codexes, new what they call codex creep, new rules, new supplements, new additions, new armies coming out. And every time they do, it basically nukes what had originally come before. If you're going to play it in tournaments and play it in official game settings and all that, you can't use the old stuff to a large extent in the new stuff. Every time something comes out, you basically have to go out and get a new army, which it's a business. It exists to make money. That's understandable. I'm not criticizing it, I'm just making a contrast. Battletech, the game storyline, for the most part, even though they have fleshed out the backstory, the game storyline starts in about 3025. The current progression of the game has gone up to the 3150s. Technology has vastly changed. The political setting has completely changed. The states have changed and evolved, and in some cases disappeared, and all of that. You don't have to play 3150 if you don't like it. You want to play Succession Wars, lower tech, simpler, more brutal, you can play in 3025. You like the high tech and the fancy? Go ahead and play in 3150. It's right there for you. Anywhere in between, you can find where in the setting it likes you. You can still get the source books, the rules still apply, you can still play it in tournaments. It does not matter. And I didn't have it on here, but I got thinking as I went, point 7. There is whatever aspect of gaming you want to play, there is a Battletech rule set or setup for it, which I'm going to put before, or I'm going to say, make it supplemental to this 6/7. Start with 6 and we'll move into 7 and go back and forth between the two. With what I said with the rules being adaptable and all that, that goes right down to how you want to play the game. There is the ridiculously intricate, classic, original way to play Battletech, what I call combat math. You want to roll for everything, every movement, every decision, everything you do, you can play it like that. You want to have a game that takes you 3 or 4 days to play because you are that into micromanaging and wanting to do everything one step at a time, you can play like that. You want to play with a bigger army, or you're somebody new just getting into it, or you're somebody like me who tries to get other people into it and doesn't want to overwhelm them with combat math. There is also the Alpha Strike version of Battletech. Much simplified rules made for either smaller units playing together with streamlined rules for quicker gameplay to not overwhelm people, which is the way I play with my kids. They love it. Or full-on armies that you don't want a week of play to take for your battle or your campaign. You can play Alpha Strike. You can also, and as long as both sides agree to the rules, in any game store, gaming community, tournament get-together, you can set up your house rules. You can do an amalgamation of the two to make it more intricate but also more streamlined. You can do like I do with my kids, which is Alpha Strike, but with a few of the things from the classic rules thrown in to give it some spice and some flavor. But with addition to that, what I'm getting into with point 7, with the a little bit of everything for everybody. You're somebody who maybe doesn't want to do the giant stompy robots. You're somebody who comes from something like bolt action and wants to do, tanks and infantry. You can play it with that. They're still perfectly viable tabletop. You want to say you're somebody who comes from one of the old tabletop air combat games, like Crimson Skies. The old, what was it, Red Baron, I think, was one that was a World War I set tabletop combat flight game. There's Aerotech for that. You're somebody who comes from, say, Star Trek Fleet Battles, the Star Wars miniature game, Battlefleet Gothic, when that still existed for the Warhammer setting. You can play with warships. There are rules for that. You can get maps for that. You're somebody who's more into computer game first-person shooter type, MechWarrior. It has been around since the early 90s. It has evolved. We are currently up to MechWarrior 5. If you want to do just online goofy matchmaking, you can play MechWarrior online. I'm just talking with the current ones. You want to do playing with your friends and just kind of going around finding battles and seeing what happens. You can play MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. You want to do a story-based, progressive campaign with an actual development of a story and an in-universe thing that you're doing, MechWarrior 5 Clans. You can play the clan invasion of the 3050s. There's that. You're somebody like me who likes the older games. You can still get the discs, and if can figure out how to get them to run on your computer, you can play the older MechWarrior games. MechWarrior 3, MechWarrior 4. I play both of them on my laptop. I love them. They're great. You want to do the more of a quicker computer version of the tabletop. You can play the HBS Battletech game from, I believe it was 2018 it came out. It has a huge following. There are all kinds of mods for it. You can play that. You want to play, let's see. I'm sorry, I got distracted by a dog barking outside. You want to play a console game. If you've still got one of the old ones, they did have, Microsoft came out with Mech Assault, which is, it's goofy, but it's set in the universe, more or less goes with the storyline of, what was going on at that time of Battletech. You can play Mech Assault on Xbox. You want to do a turn-based real-time strategy game, or not even turn-based, real-time strategy game. Look for Mech Commander and Mech Commander 2. You can play those on an old computer. Whatever aspect of gaming you want to get into, from tabletop to computer to role-playing game to miniature wargaming, there is a Battletech adaptation of it. And most of it follows the canon plot and storyline and setting. It's familiar to people that maybe you were somebody who read the novels and now wants to give the game a try. It's not going to be alien to you. Or if you're somebody who's played the game and you want to start getting into the plot, pick up the novels. You're going to recognize what's going on. There is also a massive, and I mean massive, and in-depth and very welcoming community of Battletech is the final point I will make. It is not, and this is the stereotype, it's not everybody. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus with this one. It is not what you run into a lot with Warhammer community where, oh, you don't have this newest army, or, oh, you don't play this faction, well, screw you, I don't want to play with you. Battletech players, if you show up at a open gaming night at your local community gaming store that does games, and they have Battletech, they'll play with you. They don't care. They will even let you borrow miniatures if you don't have them and want to play. We want to bring people into this community. Clearly, I'm trying to sell you on it right now. We want to bring people into this community. If you're getting into the computer games, with the exception of MechWarrior Online, you will, most of the time, you will find people who will welcome you, show you the ropes, help you out with it. You want to just dip your toe into it and see what's out there? There's Facebook communities. There are Instagram communities for people that do the miniatures and will gladly help you out with how to paint and how to work with your miniatures and make them look better if you want to make them look good. There is such a welcoming community in Battletech. We want you in this community. We want it to grow. We love this setting. Most of us are very, very happy with what CGL, Catalyst Games Labs, have done to keep the game going. They've made some missteps, some things that we're not all universally happy with, plot-wise and things like that. But that's with any setting. And as I said earlier, if you don't like where the plot has gone, play at an earlier point. Find a point of the storyline you do like and play in that. There are more than enough rule supplements, source books, novels, even computer games that are probably set in the era you're looking at. You will be able to find something in it you like. And if you want to give a look to the community and see both how simple it is to get into and how in-depth it is once you start jumping into the deep end of this pool, look on YouTube, where you currently are right now. You can find ridiculously in-depth, like feature-length documentaries by content producers like Sven Vanderplank, Big Red 40 Tech, the Black Pants Legion, obviously. Most people that are into this community, even tangentially are familiar with Battletech, know about the BPL. But all of them are worth giving a look. And most of them are open and friendly enough. If you ask a question on a video, say, I'm just coming into this and I don't understand this, they will either answer your question or they will direct you to somebody else's channel that might talk about exactly what it is you want to know about. As you can see on my channel, I've done the gaming. As you see by what I'm wearing, if you know Battletech, this is stuff that is from the game. This is the Iridani Light Horse, one of the mercenary units, and one of the regiments of the Iridani Light Horse. Even with the rank insignia from the old Star League. We love this stuff. We want to get people into it. We want it to grow. We want it to expand. We want to find more people to kill when we play tabletop. Take a look at it. Give it a shot. If you want to just play it casually, pick up a lance or a star of minis to play with occasionally with your friends, go right ahead. We'll gladly welcome you in and do it. You're somebody who's looking for a new gaming community to give a try. Maybe you've become disillusioned with what you're playing with something else. Want something simple and welcoming? Give Battletech a look. You're somebody in a computer game who wants something else to try. Take a look at MechWarrior or the HBS Battletech. You can find them on Steam. There is something here for everybody, and we want to share it with you. So please, if you're at all interested in this stuff, give Battletech a look. And if you're one of my friends who happens to see this, that I've been kind of giving nudges that we should play this, look into it more in depth, or ask me more about it if I piqued your interest on something. There's a faction for everybody. There's a unit type for everybody. There's a style of gameplay for everybody. Battletech is for everybody. It's not for edgelords. It's not for, power fantasy people. It is for people who want a little bit of escapism. You want to look at the future, where it might go, how our society could progress with understandable how it got there as opposed to space magic. Give Battletech a look. Give MechWarrior a look. Reach out to those of us that are in it. Go check out Big Red 40 Tech. Go check out Sven Vanderplank. Go check out the Black Pants Legion. Go check out Mech Frog, who does wonderful, wonderful videos about the mechs themselves. And many others that are slipping my mind because they're not ones that I actively follow like those other ones. I will watch their videos when they pop up. They're just not ones that I'm subscribed to and follow. But there's something for everybody. There's an active, lively, friendly, welcoming community to get into here. And as I do, you want something you can play with your kids? My 6-year-old son and 10-year-old daughter love Battletech. As silly as it sounds. They will almost every time I've got them for a weekend, Dad, can we play Battletech? Can we get the miniatures up? Can we play with something? They'll play with each other with the simplified rules. They'll play with me with our house rules that we have set up. You can play this with your kids. You can play this with your friends. You can play this in tournaments. You can play it as casually or in-depth as you want. You can get into the universe as casually or in-depth as you want. Go right ahead. There is something here for everybody. And if you give it a chance, I can pretty much guarantee you'll find something in it you like. So thanks for watching this. You have any questions, you want a resource, something I mentioned that you can't find, reach out to me. Comment down below. I will gladly help you out. I want to get people into this. As you've seen from my other videos, in these videos, I'm usually talking about the Gundam stuff, doing reviews and things like that. I am way more into Battletech than I am into Gundam. Not that I'm not into Gundam, but I am very much into Battletech. Next to me, I have a 4-tier rack of miniatures right now. So, give it a try. Reach out. Find somebody to ask questions. I guarantee you'll find something that will pique your interest and draw you in. See you next time. Later.